thank you very much for turning up to this event today. This is a dream come true. And it's not often you can get to say that you had a childhood dream that you had 50 years ago has come true. But 50 years ago, in 1968, I noticed something that confused me when my teacher explained multiplication to me and to the entire class. I was confused by my teacher's explanation of multiplication as a boy aged 7, because what I had noticed in her explanation was that India's 0 was missing. And throughout the rest of my schooling, I was confused by mathematics. And I must admit, I even failed mathematics at one time, and I even repeated a year at my school. But something was to happen in 1983 that changed my life. I was in a traffic accident, and my spine was smashed. And I was told by my surgeon that if I walked, it would be a miracle. I was told that if I moved, I might not ever be able to walk again. So on Friday, March the 18th, 1983, at about 1 p.m, I made a deal with God. I made a prayer and I said, God, if you can let me walk again and have children, I will fix mathematics. Now, I don't quite know why I made that promise, but I was obviously able to walk, and I have got 3 wonderful children, and I thought that I needed to honour that commitment, that pledge, that promise to God that I made in the hospital. So from that point on, my personal private goal was to do the unthinkable. Nobody else ever saw anything wrong with mathematics, it seemed, except me. Time and time again I came across explanations of mathematics that just made no sense to me. And the reason why they weren't making sense to me is that I was trying to understand how all of the things in mathematics fitted together. And the issue is that the elementary foundations of mathematics are basically broken. And they have been for over 1,000 years. Because the story is that India's 0 was picked up and spread to the Arabic world, and then people like Al-Khwarizmi and Al-Uqailisi and others, they developed their algebra based on all of the Hindu arithmetic. And the story in the history of mathematics is that India's mathematics then made its way not just to the Arabic world, but a chap called Fibonacci, Leonardo Pisano, picked up the Arabic mathematics and then brought it to Europe in the 13th century. And then, as the story goes, eventually over the centuries that passed after that, the Arabic numerals, as they were known, which were really Hindu Arabic numerals, they eventually came to replace the Roman numerals that Western Europe had been using for so long. But I'm here to say that India's real mathematics seems to have never left India. The 0 that left India from the 7th century on was the 0 as a simple placeholder. If you think about the number 107, you use the 0 to push over the 1 into another column so you don't have the number 17. Now, people believed that the Arabic world understood that 0 was also a number in its own right. But my research has shown that the Arabic mathematicians never understood zero as a number, and also in their mathematics they never used negative numbers. And that's not my word, you just don't take my word. Many scholars are also saying that. So from 1983, I made it my goal to change the way the world teaches mathematics. And as it happened, that promise that I had silently made 5 years before in a hospital emergency care ward, that promise now was reported in the newspapers. So 30 years ago, the newspapers had reported on my promise to fix mathematics, but I still didn't know how. I had to do a lot of research from that point on over many years. So probably around about 6 years ago, I made the decision to quit my career. I had a successful career in business strategy and innovation. I sold my house and I have completely focused myself to this research goal. So what I have found, no one else ever thought existed. I was looking for something that nobody had seen, but I sensed. What I have recently been documenting are the very simple laws of your own mathematician, Brahmagupta. From the year 628, he wrote a famous book, the Brahmasvita Siddhanta, and that had a chapter on algebra, which gave all the laws of mathematics involving positives, negatives, and zero. So all I'm doing is I'm coming back to India to reveal how division, how multiplication, how the basics of mathematics are totally different under Indian maths than they are under the mathematics that's taught around the world at the moment. Now, you might think that that's a strange thing, but as a historian, I have documented how the mathematics that the world understands now has really little to do with India's original mathematics that you developed as a beautiful system of understanding the universe. The mathematics that the world understands today is based on Greek mathematics. You might be familiar with people like Euclid, or perhaps Pythagoras, and the famous story about the squares on the sides of triangles. Well, the English were very much into Greek mathematics from the 16th century on. And so the very first English mathematics books were being published in England. They had a printing press, and they began to export their English language mathematics books to all of their settlements and colonies around the world. But there was only one problem. They didn't, in their definitions, include the two most important numbers in all of science. And those two numbers are 0 and 1. So all of the explanations that started to be consolidated from the British Empire that spread throughout the world were based on Greek geometry that didn't have 0, didn't even have 1 as a number, and didn't have negative numbers. But that was the operating system that the world was given by the British. So effectively, what I'm saying the world needs to do, but more importantly, India will benefit greatly from doing, is to go back to your own truths, your own heritage, because India's mathematics gets rid of all the things that confused not me only as a child, but hundreds of millions of children around the world. Now what I'd like to do is give you an example of what I noticed in class 2 in 1968. And then you'll understand how I got confused. My teacher had just finished teaching the class addition. And then she said, now it's time to learn multiplication. The first multiplication we learned was how to do the doubles, the 2 times. And she said that to double any number, you simply add that number to itself. So if you wanted to double 2, you just added 2 to itself to get 2 plus 2, and that was 4. So we had learned the doubles as the transition from learning addition to then moving on to multiplication. Now, after a few lessons of multiplication, my teacher wrote 2 into 3 on the blackboard and asked the class, who can tell me what 2 into 3 equals? I'll give you a clue. It's 2 added to itself 3 times. So I put up my hand and she called upon me. And I was a bit nervous. And she said, Jonathan, what's the answer? And I said, 8. And she said, no, it's 6. But my reaction was, how can 2 added to itself 3 times be 6? If 2 added to 1 3 times was 7. That was impossible. My teacher then drew her explanation on a number line. She did 3 hops of 2. She went boing, 2, boing, 4, 2, boing, and she landed at 6 to prove me wrong. That 2 added to itself 3 times wasn't 8, it was 6. But I was still very confused. Now what actually happened is that where my teacher made a mistake, and where this mistake has been happening since February 1570, this mistake in mathematics is that old. She started at 0. And so if you wrote out those 3 hops of 2 that she drew on the blackboard, the equation is 0 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. And that is a completely different explanation or definition of multiplication. So 2 into 3 is not, despite what the dictionaries tell you, 2 into 3 is not 2 added to itself 3 times, it's 2 added to India's 0 3 times. So mistakes like that continued on throughout the mathematics curriculum. And very often, if there was a problem in the foundations of mathematics, the teacher would say, well, here's the law, or here's a rule, memorize this rule, memorize this law, and then the numbers will work. We don't really have an explanation that we can give you, but just memorize that law. But mathematics should not be about memorizing formulas. It should be about understanding the universe and understanding the relationships between quantities. And that's how the mathematics in India started, because Brahmagupta, like many other famous mathematicians, was predominantly an astronomer. So with India's own maths and understanding of negative numbers and positive numbers and 0, that is entirely consistent with the laws of physics that have emerged over the 1,500 years since. Now another thing that my teacher said to me, this is a few years later, is my teacher said that negative numbers, by definition, are those numbers that are less than 0. Now numbers, what all numbers do is they count or measure quantities. That's what all numbers do. And mathematics is all about relationships between quantities. Now as it happens in science, the least quantity you can ever have is 0. In science and physics, you can't actually have quantities that are less than 0, and yet that's what teachers tell the little children a negative number is. It represents a quantity that's less than nothing, which is impossible in science. Now, later on, as a historian, I came to know that, well, the Chinese were using positive numbers and negative numbers for 1,400 years before they picked up on India's 0. So the Chinese were using negative numbers without any concept of 0, and their mathematics worked perfectly well. In the Chinese mathematics, it was consistent with the philosophy of yin and yang, and negatives and positives were simply equal but opposite. So that was the same philosophy of mathematics that India developed when it created 0 as a number. And by looking at the original Sanskrit of Brahmagupta and having a lot of help from professors and Sanskritists over the last 5 years I've been looking at this Sanskrit, I've documented the laws of Brahmagupta. And in the last 2 days, I've had the pleasure of touring schools in Andhra Pradesh. And I've been able to give maths class lessons to 558 children, ranging from class 7 to class 9. and they loved the Indian mathematics. I went right through Brahmagupta's laws of addition, subtraction, multiplication and division, and there are various problems that the world has never been able to solve. But these children saw how to solve those problems by understanding India's original mathematics. There's a very difficult proof in mathematics for children to learn, and that's why -1 into -1 equals +1. Well, if you understand Indian mathematics, you see that proof with your eyes, and it takes you around about 10 seconds to completely know that that is the only truth that could possibly be about -1 into -1 being +1. You see how the pictures can come out of the Sanskrit, and then it's bang in your face. And of course, that's how mathematics works. So it's like I've had to come to this over 35 years of waiting and wondering and dreaming and meditating and research and study. But these children in these schools in Andhra Pradesh, they saw in a matter of minutes proofs of things as difficult as -1 into -1 being +1. The teachers of mathematics who attended my talks down there, one of them said that he knows a lot about mathematics, but his head has just been exploded. Now, this is India's mathematics. Mathematics, I believe, is at the core of India's future prosperity. Because mathematics is a platform upon which the sciences, technologies, engineering and medicine are built upon. So the more that children can learn to love mathematics and enjoy it, but really understand it intimately and intuitively and naturally, as if it's just a simple game, that will help so many children no longer have maths fear or maths phobia, but learn to love mathematics. So that's why I'm here today, just to give back the gift of India's other zero. The zero is a number that the world never came to know. All of the information that I'm going to be is going to be made available free of charge to anyone who wants it. This is not about me coming to India to sell you anything. All I'm giving you is the gift of knowledge of your own mathematics. So thank you for welcoming to India. I've had some wonderful times in the last few days, met some wonderful people, and I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you for the question. I've heard very often from professors of physics or engineering that very often they have to reteach their incoming students basic information about how mathematics works. There are things that are fundamentally broken between how mathematics is taught and how physics works. For example, we say that here is 0, and we say that all numbers to the left of 0 are less than the numbers to the right of 0. But if we had two worlds, and we're in the middle between these two worlds, these planets are both exhibiting gravity. There's gravity pulling us this way, and there's gravity from this world pulling us this way. Now, in the middle is 0. Now, if we are in the middle of these two worlds where there's opposing forces, we don't move, because 0 is the sum of two opposing and equal forces, which is also consistent with Isaac Newton's third law of motion. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Now, if you're teaching physical laws, such as for every action there's an equal but opposite reaction, you need your mathematics, where the numbers represent counts or measures of quantities, to fit in with the laws of physics. So there are various contradictions that I went through with the children in classes 7 to 9 over the last 2 days. And one of them is I showed them several proofs, mathematical proofs, that show that negative numbers cannot be less than positive numbers. They are simply equal and opposite, and the way that Brahmagupta defined 0 is totally different to the way that the West understands 0. So in the school curriculums, they think of 0 as the result of subtracting a number from itself. So n minus n. 6 minus 6 is 0. So if you wanted to define 0, it's what you get from a number when you take that number away from itself, and you get nothing. Now that philosophy is based on only half of the number system, which we now call positive integers. Brahmagupta didn't define 0 by subtraction. Brahmagupta defined 0 by addition, which is a totally different concept. So Brahmagupta defined 0 as the sum of two equal and opposite numbers. So if you wanted an example, it would be minus 4 plus positive 4 is 0. So when you start off with completely different definitions of mathematical terms, such as 0, it then leads to a very haphazard way that you explain maths if you go on the Greek route or the conventional British-inspired route. If you follow the laws of Brahmagupta, which are consistent with physics, everything becomes very simple. The children in the classrooms, their great difficulty is dealing with positive and negative numbers. Now, if I was to ask everyone here a simple question, in Australia, I know what the answer would be, but what I often ask people is, what's negative 7 minus negative 4? And when I ask people what's negative 7 minus negative 4, more often than not in Australia, maybe not here, most people say negative 11. Now, the answer is not negative 11. There's always been confusion by adding and subtracting with positive and negative numbers. Even as adults, we don't quite understand how it all works. And I bet many of us have that secret fear that we're not that clever because we didn't do that good at school. But the issue is, if you struggled at school, it may well have been that you were like me as a child, you were trying to see how it all fitted together without the rules to memorise. And if you didn't need to spend all the time on memorising rules, what if you just intuitively knew the answer because it was obvious? That would make your studies so much more enjoyable. I'll give you a quick example. There's a law, an index law, that any number raised to the power of 0 equals 1. But if you follow the definition of exponentiation, you'd assume it wasn't 1. You'd assume it would be a different number. If you followed your explanation of the teachers, you'd get another explanation again. But if you actually had the correct definition of exponentiation, any time a child saw a little exponent as 0, like 12 to the power of 0, they'd know, that's 1. And they would completely be able to explain why. And to me, to this day, teachers at schools will struggle to explain simple things like that. So we struggle through the mathematics curriculum. We're told one thing, like you can't, little children are only taught about the positive numbers, and they're told you can't subtract a larger number from a smaller number. And then we change the rules. Later on we say, well, you can, and they're called negative numbers. What Brahmagupta teaches us is how to start off understanding positive numbers and negative numbers from the very first exposure to mathematics in a way that is simple and intuitive and obvious. And that only can empower children. And my experience in Andhra Pradesh, at these schools that I was lucky enough to visit, the Sri Prakash educational system, those children just loved the Indian maths. And I said, the maths that I'm going to talk with you is going to be different from what you know. The maths that you know is based on English mathematics explanations. What if I give you some Indian mathematics explanations? At the end, all the children said they wanted the Indian lessons. They didn't want the English type explanations of mathematics anymore. So it's a very good question. Why fix mathematics? Well, the answer is, the human species is always improving and applying something called the scientific method. I'm a heretic. I feel that no one will believe me, so I've had to do a phenomenal amount of research. Over the years, I've had to double, triple check in Latin, ancient Greek, Sanskrit, Arabic, Hebrew, French, German, Italian, Russian, Dutch, Czech, Spanish, Mandarin. I've been researching mathematics in about 18 different languages because I couldn't believe that I was the only person who had come up with the fact that there is a lot of problems in the foundations of maths. I now write mathematics papers and I now go around the world and I talk at mathematics conferences. So, sure, we can just let mathematics go as it is, but in an international comparison of countries in mathematics, out of 74 countries, India came in at second and third last. So if there's any country on the planet who is desperately crying out for a better way of teaching its children mathematics, I'd say that that country would be India. And it's also your own mathematics being gifted back to you, that Brahmagupta developed himself. My goal is eventually some of these ideas will find their way into the mathematics curriculum in the lower grades. I think that the most benefit in learning Brahmagupta's laws of positives and negatives and zero is the fact that it gives you some really fun ways and creative ways of solving problems. In the classrooms over the last couple of days, we had difficult problems. So you know what we did? We said, we'll apply Brahmagupta's addition law number 4. And by knowing how to go to Brahmagupta's laws, we're able to solve problems. But it was a very strange thing, because what we were doing to solve problems is we had 0, and we'd be adding 0 to 0 in order to solve the problems. Now, Brahmagupta's laws mention 0 so many times, and I was wondering, why does Brahmagupta keep on talking about 0, when in the Western curriculums we really ignore it? Well, as it happens, the young children are able to solve all these puzzles by doing games. So what I've been able to do is it's not just looking at the Sanskrit of Brahmagupta, because I was given a lot of help by professors and Sanskritists, and they gave me all the usual translations. But what I then did is I put the laws of Brahmagupta into pictures, so the children remember what they see. And then they play with counters, red and black counters, on multiplication maths and division maths. And before you know it, they're doing almost straight away -2 into -3, and seeing the answer is +6. And that's the usual sort of lesson that would come maybe 4 or 5 years later. So you're able to take maybe class 8 level mathematics and share it with children in class 4. Now, I'm only interested in the mathematics, really elementary mathematics, the pre-algebra level mathematics. So I just want to get more children to be happy with mathematics, and then when they get to algebra and trigonometry and calculus, I go away. I let the professors do their work. All I want to do is get as many children enjoying mathematics and getting all the answers right, so then the professors can take them and give them wonderful careers based on what they know and love about mathematics. One of the things that children find a little difficult is how mathematics is all about memorizing laws and chanting. And what I'll be doing, one of the reasons why I'm here today, is that AFX Animation and I are going to be working on a series of mathematics books for young children based on the laws of Brahmagupta. And the goal that we've got is to make an entire series of free mathematics books available to every child in India who'd like to know about the laws of Brahmagupta and how Brahmagupta solves simple mathematical problems. These books are going to have cartoon characters, they're going to have puppies in them, and they're going to have dingoes in them, and they're going to be filled with fun and games and adventures that the animals solve problems about quantities. So hopefully, between now and year 2020, I'll be going into many more classrooms and teaching many more children, but also by the end of the year 2020, we're going to have a whole series of absolutely free mathematics books. And the goal is to have them in all the languages that India wants them to be in. And then people can make their own decision. They can download these books free of charge, they can email them to friends. But the research behind these cartoon storybooks is going to be as scholarly research as you'll ever find. that the books, the maths books, are going to be fun and make children happy. And that's something very special as well. I do hope to see some of you come along to the special seminar tomorrow. I think sometimes you need to see things with your very own eyes before you can really know the truth of what I'm talking about. So I invite you to come along to the Rotary Sedan. It's 11 o'clock, 10:30 at the Rotary Sedan tomorrow. And you'll see with your eyes, step by step, I'll go through all of Brahmagupta's laws of positives and negatives and zero. And I'll show you the problems that the world is confused by, and you'll be confused by those problems as well. And then you'll see how those problems disappear when you start to revert back to the real mathematics India had in the 7th century. So I don't have anything else really at this stage to add, other than to thank the Professor here, to also thank very much my friends at AFX Animation, and thank you very much. Namaste.
উনি আপনাদের সকলকে ইনভাইট করছেন কারণ ফ্রি সেমিনার রয়েছে না যেটা বলছেন যে কারণ স্টেপ বাই স্টেপ উনি এক্সপ্লেন করবেন দ্য ব্রহ্মপুত্র ব্লক হাউ ইট ওয়াজ ইন্টারেস্টিং অ্যান্ড ইট ওয়াজ ইভলভড ইন ইন্ডিয়া ইন 7th century. এবং আসুন কালকে 10:30টায়
Thank you.